Hi, you're listening to the Professional Speaks podcast with me, Craig McKellar, your host. As an ex-Big Four auditor for 6 years, I now run a specialist recruitment consultancy called McKellar Consulting. Throughout this podcast, I speak to senior leaders from the professional services community, past, present and future. These leaders work in accounting and finance, audit, tax, corporate finance, consulting, legal and investments. In the comfort of their own office, I will be posing questions to our guests to gain insights from them across a variety of topics, including balancing work and life, mental health and mindset, risk-taking, and effective leadership. These insights will help us learn, be inspired, grow, and ultimately succeed in what we want to achieve in our careers. Here's what's coming up on today's episode.
So can we go through the accounts together? He was very amenable, very helpful. We'll do the site tour. I'm a little bit pressed for time. I'll come tomorrow. Can we just sit down and I'll do all that reviews tomorrow? So he didn't show up the following day. He literally phoned in to the group FC and admitted that he'd just fabricated the results for the last 4 months. Nothing. So Muggins here had to then rebuild everything from scratch.
Yeah.
So that was. But that wasn't fraud for personal gain. That was just somebody looking to, who'd been probably promoted too quickly, didn't want to ask for help. So there was a lot of different warning signs coming up there. He was culpable. He should have asked for help, but instead he fabricated the results.
In this episode, I'm joined by David Jolliffe, who is CFO at Novosound, an award-winning sensors company specialising in the design and manufacture of innovative ultrasound sensors. Topics discussed include how he uncovered fraud as a CFO, how firms successfully exit, and why he wrote his first short book, Boardroom Lessons, Mistakes I Made as a CFO, so you don't have to. For the listeners and viewers that don't know you, David, you are currently CFO at Novosound, which is an award-winning sensors company specialising in the design and manufacture of innovative ultrasound sensors, and I believe some other design elements as well. Is that right?
Well, yeah, Novosound's a really interesting business, actually. Yeah. The core of it is the ultrasound sensors, as you mentioned, and there's been a huge amount of research and development over the last 10 years. In fact, even before that, before the company was even spun out of the University of West of Scotland. But the core of it is the thin film sensor, which is, most ultrasound sensors are heavy ceramic and therefore are not really usable in a lot of different everyday type situations, whereas the Novosound sensor is thin film, it's created by sputtering techniques, it's flexible, it's adaptable, and what we've really focused on over the last year is adapting that sensor for use in the measurement of blood pressure, and finding ways that you can do blood pressure which is non-invasive and gives you an accurate measurement of that. So that's really exciting, actually. The company's currently on a pathway to get FDA clearance for the Sense BP product, which we're developing. And that could be very, very exciting for the future.
Yeah, so you've been here, I'll mention this in a little bit, but you've been here for a few years now, so it sounds like it's going well, it's evolving well.
Well, the thing I find about early stage in technology businesses is it can go well, but it never ever goes to plan. Yeah. Because just by their very nature, if you get an early stage business, a technology business, you're trying to do something new, you're trying to do something different. If you've got good technology at the heart of it, you will probably find a way, find a path. But at the end of the day, you'll put together your business plans, but there's always something which changes, sometimes for the positive. Quite often it's challenges you've got to overcome. So, Novosound, we've faced our share of challenges, but actually I think the path we're now on is really potentially very exciting because the medtech market is absolutely huge, and we're currently looking to raise funds in the States for the next stage of the development.
Great. No, it sounds like you say, it sounds like a very exciting time, and some other conversations that I have back up what you're just saying there regarding the medtech environment being quite a hot place to be right now. So fingers crossed for all that success to come. So the Professional Speaks, centred around the guest and I guess giving insights to those that are listening to this. So before going on to maybe your career and experience you've had then, just a bit about you. It'd be helpful to know maybe a bit about your upbringing or who you are now.
Yeah, so if we go all the way back, went to school, Lesmahago High, then Larkhill Academy, Glasgow University, BAC. Great times, graduated in 1984, which, it's an awful long time ago now when I think about it, but it just seems like yesterday.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've therefore enjoyed what I've been doing over the last 40 years. Joined Arthur Anderson as a trainee, which was, Anderson's was a super company. Gave me a really, really good training, good grounding. So really enjoyed that. Myself personally, got 4 daughters, 2 of whom are embarked upon the same path as me. Olivia is already a manager at PwC. Lara, my youngest, she sat her finals this week. 2 other girls, one's a PE teacher now living in Dubai, the other one's a marketing manager. So,
wow.
So plenty to keep us busy.
Yeah, absolutely. No, great. So I mentioned that your career. So I'm going to touch on just some of the roles that you've had, just to give listeners and viewers some context, and then what we'll do is, we'll focus on a few key topics. So, started your career off in audit and corporate finance. That was Anderson, then to Grant Thornton. Yeah. Which led to finance director role at Scottish Power, then CFO role at Aviagen, which is a global leader in poultry genetics. You then became CFO of Rangers Football Club, and then chief exec of Pyrogard, which sold fire safety glass, and then another CFO role at Optoscribe, which was a laser write technology company, and then your current role, CFO at Novosound, which you've held since 2023. So, some great roles there, different companies, different sectors. Did you find that they were relatively kind of easy to go into because you're in a finance role and it's just learning, I guess, a bit about the sector?
Yeah, I think if I look back, I think the ICAS training gives you the grounding, and then once you've embarked upon your career in industry, let's say, there's a number of skills which ultimately actually, if you're working in finance and actually commercial activity, these skills are broadly transferable. So it's not like you are a scientist, your PhD in physics and you're very, very focused on a specific area. So what I have found is that a lot of the skills that I've learned on the experiences I've had are ultimately transferable across different industries. And that's, I think, one of the good things about starting off your career in finance. That's certainly what I've found.
And would you also say, starting off your career in professional services, because I guess you're doing your accounting exams, but your clients are all in different sectors.
Different sectors, exactly.
Yeah.
So, you don't probably fully appreciate it at the time, but you're getting a good grounding in lots and lots of different areas. You're getting, and if you've got an inquisitive mind, you're learning everywhere you're going. You're picking up things. Sometimes you're picking it up without even
realising it. Yeah. No, great. So as I mentioned, a few topics I want to discuss today, and interestingly, you've drafted completion of your first book.
Yes.
That's exciting. So that's called Boardroom Lessons, Mistakes I Made as a CFO So You Don't Have to. So I guess before we come into some themes, what made you write that book? Why now?
Well, I think I mentioned my youngest daughter's doing her fit, and it probably, you get to that point, you're thinking, bloody hell, where did that's my youngest doing those exams, and I remember how stressful that was all those years ago. So then you start to reflect on different things that have happened throughout your career. I think also, so there was part of it was just it was a natural thing to think about at the time, and then it was more I've been fortunate in that I've had a lot of people who have helped me through my career, mentored us, and probably I would have made even more mistakes if I hadn't had that help and that assistance. So I just started actually putting it down on paper, and it's evolved from there. So that's how it came about.
And when are you hoping for the launch of it?
I'm hoping that we will launch first week in May.
Great.
So just put it out on Amazon, both Kindle and paperback form.
So I think when this episode's out, it'll be after that week, so it'll already be out. So can put a link in the comments or something like that. So one of the themes I wanted to focus on that you mentioned in the book is, well, you uncovered fraud when you were in your CFO role at Rangers Football Club, and I've had a previous chat around, I guess, ethics and accountants and maybe some of the challenges that finance professionals can find with pressure in terms of being in an organisation, and if they think something is not quite right. So I guess, would you be able to shed some light on how that came about, what you did, and thinking about maybe some helpful advice to others that might be in similar situations now or maybe in the future?
Yeah, well, in fact, there's actually 2 instances of fraud. Now, that actually sounds quite bad, but then if you put it into context, I've been working 40 years, so I've come across thousands of people, and most of them are, are good and honest and, trustworthy.
It's a good point,
So I do want to make that point first and foremost. So I think the reason that you remember these instances is because, first of all, they are fairly rare, and because of that, they do leave an impression on you. The first one actually was at Sidlaw Group, and that was a little bit unusual because I do cover it in the book, but it was literally the guy there, I won't mention his second name, but Paul had been promoted into the site accountant role. The company was going through a lot of different restructuring, so the figures were coming in every month, and they were always very, very close to budget, and that just sort of triggered this just doesn't feel right, because we're restructuring, we're moving contracts about, every other site was having either big teething difficulties or their revenues were rocketing because we placed additional business into the site, so it just didn't feel right that this one site was just pretty close to budget. So to cut a long story short, I investigated, I went down, I sat down with Paul, said, can we go through the accounts together? He was very amenable, very helpful. He said, we'll do the site tour. I'm a little bit pressed for time. I'll come tomorrow, can we just sit down and I'll do all that reviews tomorrow? So he didn't show up the following day. He literally phoned in to the Group FC and admitted that he'd just fabricated the results for the last 4 months. Nothing. So Muggins here had to then rebuild everything from scratch. So that was, but that wasn't fraud for personal gain. That was just somebody looking to, who'd been probably promoted too quickly, didn't want to ask for help. So there was a lot of different warning signs coming up there. He was culpable. He should have asked for the help, but instead he fabricated the results.
Is it a sense of a lot of people get this insecurity, fear that they're going to get found out, to imposter syndrome. An aspect of that.
I think that it's really unfortunate, but you have to be honest and sort of say, I need a bit of help here. I don't understand the system. I don't quite know fully what I'm meant to be doing. So that was the first example of fraud. It actually turned into, I had to rebuild, basically the balance sheet from nothing, from scratch. We got a small team in. We did it over a period of weeks. That was really quite satisfying to get it right, really right at the end of it. But the one at Rangers was totally different in that, the retail director there did it for personal gain. And again, there was a bit of, the sort of backstory is I'd gone in there, the club had two divisions, the retail and the football, two young heads of both of those divisions who actually hated each other's guts, if the truth be told. And were, both saw each other as rivals, and then trying to work within the retail business, it was just extremely protective of the management information in a way that just, got the hackles going up right away. It's like, we're all part of the one. See, we're meant to be shooting in the same direction. And the retail management accountant, I have to give him an awful lot of credit because he was in a really difficult position. But Ian, because it wasn't just me that uncovered the fraud, it was, I knew there was something not right. Ian was professional enough to, say, I'm not quite happy about some of the aspects, but I don't really know what's going on. And of course, he's not senior enough to call out the director. And the CFO at the time of the group, Donald Wilson, was extremely helpful. So it was a team effort in actually getting to the bottom of the fraud. But ultimately, it was a 6-figure fraud, involving supposedly quality issues around the kits, and quite where the eventually ended up and where the money ended up. Well, we got to the bottom of it by the end of it, but it was a team effort because, let's say, if Ian hadn't, been, it's very difficult for a whistleblower. That's quite a brave thing to do, because you never quite know where it's going to end up with your boss. And ultimately, he got sacked, and he should have been sacked. Maybe he even should have been jailed, but he did get sacked because the proof was there.
You talked before on this fraud case at Rangers that you had to be careful. You had to find out that what was going on was fraudulent before confronting the director. So for people listening to this who might think something's going on, are unsure if they can trust, I guess, a senior person who's not committing the fraud, what advice would you give to them to how to go about it?
Most of the time, things are really quite straightforward. You are able to ask somebody outright, for information or for an explanation, or to look at, if you're a financial controller or FD in a business, you're entitled to look at the information. So the issue here was when it was almost like they were trying to prevent me looking at certain aspects of the information. That's an immediate warning sign. The difficulty, of course, you've got is that if somebody is in a senior role, their position is a little bit protected right away. In that particular instance as well, the retail director was very friendly with the company chairman and made no bones about telling everyone how friendly he was and how he socialised. And again, that possibly was part of his whole cover up. But of course, you've got to make sure that you're on solid ground before making any accusations, because if you accuse somebody of something and it turns out not to be true, then you're probably in a fairly...
You're not going to go far at that company.
You're not going very far.
In that firm,
You've certainly created enemies and problems for yourself. But ultimately, you've got to do the right thing. Now, that particular case of fraud, Donald and I had probably daily phone calls, and it took us several months of painstaking ground research, to make sure we were actually on really, really solid ground before we could actually make any accusations. And if we got it wrong, the unfair dismissal case for a really senior employee, so that's the worry you've got. But if something doesn't feel right, then it's probably not.
Okay, no, that's good advice.
But I'm not saying it's easy.
It
isn't easy, but ultimately you've got to try and do, you've got to do the right thing. And you've certainly got to be able to look at the information.
Yeah, no, great. Another theme I wanted to focus on was you have worked for, several management teams and several good management teams, but we've talked before about how maybe a good management team in a company that's in a good environment, in terms of a good sector, can do a lot better than a good management team that's in a company that's in a not so good sector. Yeah. Do you want to talk a bit more about that? And obviously people can read more in your book about this, but some of the kind of headlines or the highlights there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, certainly what working in PE-backed businesses has taught me is that the sector you operate in is absolutely critical, because, the parallel I can draw, I went to a company called Rust Breeders, which changed its name to Aviagen. And that was an absolutely super business. It was a PE-backed business. It was backed by BC Partners. But ultimately, it was a chicken breeding business, but it was based on genetics. So a lot of science behind it. But the great thing about the sector you're operating in, food everybody eats. Poultry is probably the only protein that every religion will eat as well. So you've got a booming market, you've got a growing market. We had the best product in the market, and the advantages, again, you've got to be a wee bit of a nerd to want to learn all of this, but our birds would convert feed into weight better than the competition. That doesn't sound like much, but if you are a poultry breeder, your biggest cost is grain. So if you've got a bird which will fatten up quicker on the same, on a lesser amount of grain, you make huge cost savings. So right away you've got, that's the advantage. And they've been selectively bred to exhibit these traits. But we had a team who were all bought in for a purpose. The management buyout from Hillsdown Holdings. A super team of people, right from the vets, to the geneticists, the scientists, the technical guys in the field. Everybody was bought into what we were doing, and we flew. We absolutely, we increased revenues every year. I think Aviagen is still the number one poultry breeder for meat across the globe. It's now part of the West Johan Group. It probably has more than 50% global market share.
Wow.
Just a terrific business. So we got a really nice outcome from that. And everybody worked for it.
Yeah.
Whereas I went to a company called CGI, which became Pyrogard, it was operating in the fiberglass market. So it's essentially part of building supplies, and ultimately you're supplying into contractors. So similar story, we invested in the plant. We improved productivity, we improved quality, we increased turnover, and we got absolutely nowhere in terms of an exit, because ultimately, building industry is pretty cyclical. It had been refinanced actually at probably the previous cycle top, so we were on quite a high barrier to try and get again. So despite having a good management team, despite improving the product, despite increasing our sales in the UK, the Netherlands, France, nothing.
So was it pushback from investors? You're trying to exit and get more external investment, be bought over, for example?
We were already PE backed, but it had been refinanced in, I think it was 2008, at a value of £35 million. It was making about 4 million EBITDA, so that's quite a toppy valuation even then. So for the equity to become worth anything, we had to get above that bar. Even worse, though, out of that 35 million, I think it was something like 17 or 18 million was on a shareholder loan. The loan, it accrued interest, so that then therefore meant that the barrier or the level of value we needed to get to was getting higher all the time. And I did say to the chairman early doors, we need to negotiate with the backers to say that if we can get their shareholder loan cleared, we need a part of that. But he came back and said, no, I've sorted it. We're getting really good equity stakes. I've got 10%, you've got 5%. And it's like,
it
ended up 10% and 5% of nothing. So.
Yeah. So
the sector made a big difference.
Yeah, so someone that is in a good management team in a company where it's in a difficult industry, it's trying to get a successful exit. It's just, I guess, there's only so much you can do.
There are only so many levers. There's only so much you can do. I mean, I actually did enjoy the turnaround that we did in terms of the business. We transformed it from a really quite old-fashioned factory that was probably a health hazard. And by the end of the 10 year, we're inviting guests and distributors in. We're doing factory tours. It's brand new. It's shiny. It's looking great. A lot of things have been automated. We're producing more off of one line than we did off of two previously. But ultimately, there wasn't any payoff for us from it, and nor for the shareholders, frankly, either. They took a bath as well. So, if you're in the wrong sector and you paid too high a price, you're just never ever going to get that boundary.
But obviously, valuable experience. You went onto different roles, so those individuals, there's always something to learn from it.
And that's one of the reasons of I'll commit some of these mistakes to paper and let other people know. It might just stop them making the same ones. Yeah,
and another theme is, which is probably linked, is working for PE-backed businesses, but also businesses maybe that aren't PE-backed but they're high growth. Yep. And the differences in working with those businesses, I guess, one, you've got investors to report to quite regularly, and one you'll have different shareholders, or not shareholders, but different stakeholders to report to. Looking back, would you say, can you generalise it to say I prefer working for PE-backed, I prefer working for high growth, or not really?
I don't think you can. I don't even think you can generalise PE backers as the same either. Because you've got different investors at different stages in a business. So if I take Optiscribe, for instance, spin out from Heriot-Watt University, backed by Archangels, Par, Equity and Maven, so Scottish-based early stage investors. And I joined there. Actually, funny enough, it was from my old boss at Grant Thornton who put me in touch. So it was George Elliott who put me in touch with the guys at Optiscribe. But in as CFO there, it looked as it was supposed to be on the cusp of really going, getting into good 7-figure revenues on the back of a couple of contracts that they had in the bag. And within weeks of joining, one of the contracts that was in the bag was no longer in the bag. Right. So that was not great. It was particularly not great because they had just completed the fundraise with the aforementioned investors. Now, if you've just put £3.5–4 million in on the back of a contract which is going to take you to heaven, and then that contract disappears, you're probably not going to be best pleased. What I've got to do is give those shareholders credit. I'm not saying they were pleased, but what they did was, we obviously as a management team had to rewrite the business plan and refocus. There were obviously a lot of questions to be answered, but they continued to back the business. So they were actually very supportive to, a business which had looked as if it was on a path. And that one, I was there for 4 years, and we did manage to rebuild it, refocus, and we got the exit to Intel. So, it's a really good success story, and it shows that you can't just lump all PE investors into the same sort of bag, because some investors will work with you. Others have got bad names, or they're cutthroat rep, and some rightly so. But so you can't just say.
No, I agree. Seeing it in professional services, a lot of accountancy firms are being PE-backed by obviously different investors, and not everybody is going to win, let's say, successfully exit, and a lot of that is going to lie on shoulders of the relationship between the PE house and the firm. Yeah. So different outcomes there as well.
Different outcomes, but it all depends, as it always does, on the people. And you find out who you can work with and who you can trust and who you can build relationships with. So up to Optiscribe, we were fortunate. We could, the shareholders worked with us continued to support us, and everybody got the outcome we were looking for at the end. So it can work. On the other hand, at Pyregard, it didn't work.
Yeah.
Despite everybody's best efforts. Sometimes it doesn't. That's the nature of the PE game.
Yeah, I'm sure there's more detail in the book as well for people to have a look at. Kind of final theme I want to talk about was around mentorship. So, I think you mentioned when you were FD at Scottish Power, you had a mentor that even went through every transaction, every line on the trial balance, asked you what it was, did you know what it was, which was really interesting, and if you want to share some more of that, that'd be great. Is mentorship something you would tell your daughters to look for, to start thinking about, at this stage that they're at in their career?
Oh, definitely. I think the chap you're referring to there is Ian Russell, who was finance director at Scottish Power, and he used to do what they called a trial balance review. Now, I'm finance director of Generation Wholesale. We have a TV which is hundreds of different accounts in it, and we weren't unique. He would come out and he would go through every single line with you, and as he would do with the energy supply division or the contracting division and so on. And I know some of my peers hated it, but actually, this was. It taught me a really, really valuable lesson. It wasn't actually looking for you to explain every number. He wanted you to know what every line actually meant. Because if you've got 300 lines in your TV and half a dozen of them you don't know what they're there for, why are they there? What's hidden there? What's sitting there that shouldn't be? So that was part of the thinking. The other part was, by going through it, it showed that you fully understood your business. You knew what every account was open for, and you could, if necessary, explain the movements in them. Now, if you don't have that level of understanding in your business, what are you actually missing? Because you are missing something. So that actually stuck with me. I didn't see it as a chore. I actually thought it was a really, really valuable lesson. The other thing I got at Scottish Power, my direct boss was a chap called Ken Voles. And again, Ken was really keen on the detail. And so I would go and sit with Ken once a week and would take him through. And again, he wasn't doing it to second guess you. He was doing it just to make sure that you actually knew. And I think it's absolutely right. It is absolutely right. So that always stuck with me, that you should really be able to know and explain every line on your TV if you have to. Not just at audit time, at any time.
Well, I was going to say there, when you were an auditor, when you were in professional services, do you think, when you're in that role, and speaking from personal experience, you do need to know what every line is, because you're ultimately the firm's going to sign off on these. Going into industry and going into finance roles, can you kind of lose some of that? What would I call it? Kind of attention to detail, and that's what you maybe like. You got here's an individual that's actually really focused on it. Whereas not every business, not every finance person will be, because you're juggling so much in your role.
Yeah, but it is at the core of it, because if you can't trust the numbers at the base of it, then any analysis you try to do thereafter is potentially a work of fiction.
Yeah.
If you've got an accrued income line which is slowly growing and you don't know why it is, then that's not very good.
No. Yeah.
Just as for instance.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that was, and the other thing I've got to say was, you work in a big organisation like that, and obviously there's a lot of internal politics. I'm not a fan, but Ian was great at, because if you're a FD or a controller in a division, you've essentially got your two bosses. You've got your line boss, and then you've got your functional boss. And Ian was very good at keeping the confidences and making sure that nothing was taken out of context. And that's important. You've got to be able to, if you can work with people like that, it really, really makes such a difference. So you contrast that with the later environment at Rangers, for instance. Again, I had a great environment working at Abiogen. So the environment you work in is key as well. You do your best work in the good environments.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So over 40 plus years of your career so far, we've touched on a few themes there. Fraud, working with high growth businesses, PE-backed businesses, good management teams, mentors as well. I think there's a good 4 or 5 themes there to bring out of your book. Is there anything else in the book that we've not covered that you might want to mention, just that's might be helpful for people to know that's in there?
I think it literally it's not a biography. It's literally lessons I have learned, and I continue to learn, to be honest with you. And actually, one of the things I touch on is the fact that I've moved about, like every 4 or 5 years into different roles, different industries. So I think that's the other thing I'd say to anyone is just to keep learning. I don't feel like I've been working for 40 years because I'm learning all the time. I'm still learning. So I think that's the key that I would like people to get out of it. And hopefully I can be, a mentor to other people. I've tried to do that to various different people, but not in a formal way. I think the best way to do it is just a little bit of advice. I mean, not be in people's faces, but just sit with them, talk to them like we were doing.
No, great, and individuals that are listening to this will hopefully learn, and then read your book and learn some more. And I guess if anybody wants to get in touch with you, then they can do.
More than happy.
Over the next 12 months, do you have any goals, kind of personal goals, professional goals? I always like to end with this question.
Yeah, so I've got several goals actually. On a business level, I'd like Novosound to complete a US fundraise this year. We've worked with the likes of Par and Kelvin and other early stage investors. We need to raise a Series A round and to enable us to then move forward along the FDA pathway more quickly. We've actually started working that with a US-based CF advisor, so I'm hopeful we'll be able to do something there middle of this year. Once we do that, what I'd like to do is I'm going to go into a sort of part-time role with then Novosound, reduce my hours, but to allow me to do other things. But amongst that, I want to do a lot of it from the sun. So, so go and spend some time in Cyprus and enjoy that, but still continue working. The great thing about the roles today is you can work remotely from anywhere. So
see your daughter in Dubai.
See my daughter in Dubai.
Work from there.
Easier to top across from there as well. So so there's lots of goals. But those are the principal ones. A bit of a change in my own, focus this year. Reduce the out, but still do different things, and then get a bit more sunshine.
Good. Well, good luck with all of that, and I'm sure we'll follow the journey of Novosound as well over the coming months and years, and hopefully get that fundraise as well.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks very much for coming on the Professional Speaks, Dave. It's great to have you.
Yep, really enjoyed it, Craig.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you for listening to the Professional Speaks podcast. Remember, you can watch the episode recording on our YouTube channel, and if you can, please do subscribe and share with all of your friends. The more people who listen to this, the more guests we can have, so that you can learn, be inspired, grow, and ultimately succeed in what you want to achieve in your career. Please also visit our website at www.mckellarconsulting.co.uk and feel free to contact me if you have any feedback on this episode or would like to chat about your career. I'd love to hear from you. This podcast was produced by Springwood Studio Productions.